Welcome to another program in our series, Freethinking Forum. I'm Bill Weir, the host and producer, and I'm delighted to have with me today my friend Inez Dockter. Good. And Inez has done a great service, I think, to not just Prairie girls, but everyone who has a memory of growing up on the prairie and hearing about it, caring about it. This is a book that Inez has, as she was growing up on a Dakota farm, whose family had deep roots in German immigrant grandparents' ideas and values. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Bill.
Well,
Yeah.
And we've only known each other a few months, and yet I feel indebted to you already for letting me know about your book, Prairie Girl Memoir. And it has in it, I think, things that relate to so many people's lives as they were understanding themselves. You help them to do that in the context of their youth also.
Yes.
So I know why you wrote the book, but why do you say you
I
wrote
know?
the book?
Yes. Well, why did I write this? Sometime, maybe about 10 years ago, I went to a book signing, and this man wrote a book about his life, and he said, when you die, what will you leave behind? Will it just be your name on a tombstone, the date of birth and the date of death? And he said, you know, you're so much more than that. And you know, that gave me the idea. I knew already then I wasn't going to leave my heirs, my children, my grandchildren, any inheritance of lots of money. I knew that. So I just decided, you know what, this is what I want to leave behind for them. I want them to be able to pick this up, maybe not now, but maybe down the road. And questions might come up about their grandmother or their mother. And here it is. It's in print. Took me probably about 5 years to get all these memories together, and
Well, it came together well.
well, thank you, Bill. You know, the childhood that I had was very, of course, rural, and there were a lot of things expected of us that maybe now a generation, 2 generations from now aren't expected. But when you're a child of a farm family, the main thing at that time was you're expected to pitch in and work. And,
Yes. And what
work,
kind of work did you do on the farm?
I did pretty much everything. We were out in the fields and helped whatever we could help. Hoed, pulled weeds, picked potato bugs off of potato plants. This is, you know, these were organic farms. There was no spraying. That was not going on.
No herbicides?
No, not very little, very little. And, you know, as I got older, I learned how to work in the fields with tractors and help with haying, and there was always something during the summer, spring, summer, and fall. There was always a lot to do, and that's just what you did. You were expected to do. Milk cows.
No chickens?
Chickens, big flocks of chickens and eggs, and so there was.
So maybe one of your earliest jobs in the family was go out and pick up the fresh eggs,
Feed the chickens,
feed the
carry the
chickens.
water, carry the grain,
Yeah, good for you.
pick up the eggs, bring them in the house. They
Yeah.
were sold for profit, you know.
Of course.
So, yes.
They help pay the bills.
That's right, yes. The farm women were very protective of the egg money because that's basically what allowed them to buy
Buy-
groceries, buy clothes for the children, and anything else that they wanted to use for their spending money. So that was very
Yeah,
important.
I've heard that from others on growing up on
Yes,
farms.
yes, yes.
Good custom.
Good custom, yes, yeah.
And how did things go in those early years?
Well, they were, I used to think when I woke up in the morning, this was particular once I was in my early teens when I would wake up in the morning, I think, there's just nothing that was left to be done. My mother we did everything we possibly could do. And I thought, today, maybe my mother wouldn't find anything for me to do, or my father. That's not the way it was. There was always
She always found.
there was always things to do. There was never not a time where there wasn't some kind of effort, some kind of work went into some kind of project, whatever it was. There was always plenty to do, yes.
And did you get to go to school? I understand many did not.
Well, that's true. You're right about that. The state of North Dakota, where I grew up, was designed, it was an agricultural state, and it was designed around agriculture. So we started school after Labor Day, and we didn't have the full 9 months of school. We were out of school by the end of March, because that's when all the spring work started, you know, planting and getting the fields ready. So a lot of boys especially were kept out of school for the farm work. And also the law at that time was, the state law was that you had to educate your children until they were done with the 8th grade, or were age 16, I guess it was. And so the farm families, or any of the families didn't have to send their children to school after they were through the 8th grade.
But I can't imagine growing up in that situation. I was in the city of Winnipeg, and not too far away from your North Dakota farm,
Mm-hmm.
but quite a different expectation of school.
Right, right.
And was it also different? Were you in a one-room schoolhouse?
Yes, yes.
Not.
One-room schoolhouse. All the grades were in one room. No kindergarten. I went to school. I was 5 in June, and I went to school in September, 1st grade. There was no kindergarten. And it turns out that because, you know, there were, at that time, some of the families were not that large. And so I ended up in grade 1 through 8 all by myself. I had no one else in my...
No one else at your grade level?
No. So basically what the end result was, I kind of had a private tutor for 8 years.
Great.
Because the teacher was a one-on-one, and I remember...
Well, that's why you're so well educated.
There you go, yeah. I remember times when I'd be done with my classwork, and I would sit and listen to the other grades. So I was kind of soaking up whatever was going on around me for the whole time, the whole 8 years, yes.
Oh, good for you.
Yes, and we played outdoor during recess. There were outhouses. The
Of
teacher.
course. It's better than having indoor plumbing.
The teacher was responsible for building a coal fire with coal, and making sure there was water there to drink. There was no plumbing, no well. The schoolyard had a barn on it, and it's hard to believe now, but we were 2 miles from the school. And my father was very handy. He built a sled, a little sled, and in the winter time we'd cut across the farm fields, neighbors' farm fields, with a workhorse, a large workhorse. And when I was 9 years old, I was able to get this horse to school, myself and my younger sister, who was first grader, with a big workhorse. And then when we didn't have snow during the spring and the fall, he somehow found a four-wheel buggy, and he adapted it to a workhorse and took that buggy to school, unhitched it, put the horse into the barn. When I say workhorse, I'm talking a big horse,
Yeah.
you know, and put it in the barn, and after school, brought the horse out, hitched it up, and off we went home. I was 9, and I wasn't even a big kid, so I just can't imagine a 9-year-old doing that now. Yeah.
Well, congratulations. You learned early how to take care of harnessing the horse.
Yeah, we left the harness on because the harness was really heavy. But we took the bridle off and give the horse a couple of forks full of hay and for the day. Yeah. Yes.
Well, that's neat. And did you also, I think you mentioned you were active in church as well.
Yeah, the interesting thing is the farm that I grew up on, about 1/8 of a mile from the farm, we always said it was up the hill, but it probably wasn't much of a hill. It was just probably a gentle rise. There was a one-room building there, and in fact, my father used to walk to the church and build a fire on Sunday mornings before we did chores. And so that was the church we went to. It didn't have any, we didn't have any electricity at that point. So, and then about half a mile from the church, and this was the family was German immigrants. They were not from Germany directly. They came from the Ukraine, and they spoke German. Our church was in German. The service was in German. Our Sunday school was in German. Our songs were in German. So, and that continued until I was like in my early teens, and then about half mile from that school, that church, was the cemetery that was part of the congregation, and.
So that was on your land?
Was on a corner of my parents' land, and the cemetery was quite large. I think the founders thought, these families are just going to keep getting larger and more population, but it didn't work that way. So on about a half of that cemetery, my parents cut the grass. They had the haying rights because it was on their land. And we used to play when our parents were out making hay and that.
Please don't touch the microphone.
Oh, okay. So, I have a lot of memories of that, and I'm from a family of 7, and 2 of my siblings are buried there. They died at young ages, you know, in their early age. And then my great-grandparents and grandparents and parents, and a lot of family relatives are buried there. And also I had a loss at when I was just barely 16 of my best friend, the person I hung around with, Maxine, was killed in a car accident.
Oh, that must have been hard on you.
Tragic loss.
As well as her family.
Pardon?
As well as her family.
As her family, yeah. It turns out that I had a relationship with the family until they all died. Yeah.
So you continued friendship with
right,
the family.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good.
I did. Right.
And that must have been challenging with Maxine, your best friend, gone. And were there other losses that affected you?
Well, one of the big losses that I think affected me and my, you know, as a future as an adult was that what we talked about earlier, that the families did not have to send their children to high school if they didn't want to. And that was the way the law was at that time. They changed it like 2-3 years later. They changed that. And so a lot of the families, especially the farm families, made decision that they weren't going to educate their children past 8th grade. Well,
but did you continue?
No, I didn't.
Really?
No, I didn't. Really didn't have a choice. You know, when you're a 12-year-old, your parents make the decisions. You know,
But you seem so well educated.
Well, 20 years later, I went back to school.
Oh.
And got my GED and took some college courses, and yeah, it was 20 years later.
Good for you.
Yes. The instructor that was in charge of getting you ready to write the GED test said he had never ever had anybody that never went to high school. He said, I always had high school dropouts. He said, you're the first one. He said, you never even dropped in, so you couldn't drop out. He always joked about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so
but you were somehow able to make it through to the GED preparation.
Yes.
Without even having been at high school.
Right. Yeah, they
Good for you.
Thank you.
And you went on to work in a hospital?
Well, I eventually, ended up with a professional career that somehow I did. I worked in administration in a nursing home and worked as a caseworker at Hennepin County and
here in Minneapolis?
Yeah, in Minneapolis, yes.
So that's quite an accomplishment.
Right, well, thank you, yes.
Do you want to go back to any parts of your book that we've left out? We have about 10 minutes left.
Okay. Well, when I started writing the book, I really didn't know that it was going to go to all the areas that it did, because I think when you start jogging those memories, it jogs others. So, I had no idea where some of the memories would go to, because, we're talking, some of these things happened, over 70 years ago. So, so that was really, I had an awareness, yes.
Well, 70 plus years of accomplishment.
Yeah, that's right. And being that I was, from my grandparents were immigrants and on both sides of the family, one of my deepest regrets is that I never asked a lot of questions that they probably would have been happy to tell me, stories.
Wouldn't it be good to invite them.
Yes, yes.
Come
I mean,
here.
you know, they came as they ended up farming on the prairie. They were homesteaders. You know, they broke the sod, and you know, they did amazing things for their, you know, being transplanted from someplace else, and harsh conditions, harsh weather conditions, and I'm sure, you know, it was this everyday struggle to figure out how you're going to feed the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you were telling me a while ago that you had chickens, and your mother guarded that egg money.
She did, yes.
And did that ever amount to anything where you could go to some event together with other members of your family? Or was no entertainment?
Oh, well, yeah, there was. Yeah, the small towns, you know, they were people, they kept the stores open maybe 1 or 2 nights a week so that the farm people could come in and do their shopping and, you know, whatever they needed to buy. And it was called open night. And of course, the kids loved it. And we ran around in the town and, you know, just met with friends and tried to figure out what we would do with maybe the 10, 15, 20 cents we had. You know, we'd spend the whole night trying to figure out how we'd get our best value for buying whatever we wanted to buy, you know, whether it was a bubble gum or ice cream cones or whatever. Yeah, that was, you know, there was a plan involved in that.
Yeah,
Yes.
you had to plan how you spend your
Exactly.
your little allowance.
That's right. Yeah.
Or had you earned it?
Well, we were not ever said that we expected that there was an allowance. We never expected that, you know, that we would get paid for anything that we worked. That was I don't think that was ever even brought up. It was never even considered. We were just whatever our parents handed us, whether it was a dime and 2 nickels or a nickel and 2 dimes, whatever. That's what we had to work with, you know.
Yeah.
There was no questions asked, no begging, no carrying on, no crying, none of that. Yes.
And we've still got at least more than 5 minutes left. Is there anything else in the different phases of your life that you would like to tell us in the context of Prairie Girl Memoir?
Well, the one thing that was very apparent to me after I left home, and a lot of the young people didn't go to college, and they got married very young and left home, moved on, and I ended up in a big city, and I was not prepared for, you know, for earning a living, I just wasn't. That was, you know, very, there's an awareness there that that's just the way it was.
So that could have been pretty challenging years for you.
It was.
To learn how to be a girl in the big city.
Yeah, that's right. It was. Yeah, it was an eye opener. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It was for my sweetheart also.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
She worked locally at first, and then went in to become what is it, Northwestern Bell Telephone Company?
Yes.
Operator in Minneapolis.
Right.
But
yeah.
went back to the county where she'd grown up pretty soon. and married.
Yeah.
And
Right.
had,
Well, it's another thing about, while I was doing the research on this book on mostly my paternal grandfather, Doctor, I found out that, and I was always a big fan. I've read and dived into all of the things that Laura Ingalls Wilder did, you know,
oh, yes, I was
Yes.
going to ask her about
Yes, and so I was
Ask her about
always
her.
had a deep interest in you know, her life and all that she did, and I found out that they were my grandfather Doctor and her were the same age, within like months apart, and they
And they knew each other?
no, they didn't. They like lived in different worlds, but they were the same age. They lived in the same territory, Dakota Territory, before North and South Dakota were separate states. And they also were homesteaders at the same time. You know, took out their homestead claim, and they also got married within a number of years at the same time. They, you know, so there was
The
all
same generation?
these parallels. Yeah.
Yes.
But of course, they came from different worlds, because Laura came from a family that had settled in the East and then, you know, migrated across the country, where my grandfather was born in Ukraine, which was part of Russia at the time. Yeah.
Did he bring any of that heritage besides the language? He brought the German language from when the family, his parents were in Germany.
Well, I think it was maybe great-grandparents or, you know, further back, yeah.
Yeah.
But they never changed their language. They never changed a lot of their customs. They didn't adapt to the Russian. It was one of the reasons a lot of them left, because they never adapted to that culture.
Mhm.
Yes.
It is different than here.
Definitely, yes.
We've got about 1 minute left, and I'm trying to sense what our viewers might ask you at this point.
Well, a lot of people ask me, you know, how did you remember to write all those things down? A lot of people ask me that. I couldn't remember all of that, especially somebody that's my age. I just say, you know what? If you're leaving any heirs, if you have any children, you know, that would be really a good idea to write some of those things down, even if you don't even publish it in a book.
And you didn't do that you didn't write this at a young age.
No, I wrote it, I probably started when I was at least 75.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Inez, for being such a wonderful guest.
I was happy to be here.